Hi there everybody, welcome to the channel. In this video I'm going to talk about busking. So in this one I'm going to offer some advice to people who are thinking of doing it for the first time and who are pretty new to it. So hopefully these points will stand you in good stead, and it's stuff to bear in mind when you get out there and you kind of, you're finding your feet with it. And even for people who have been doing it a while, hopefully you should find this at least mildly entertaining. So here they are. The first bit of advice I would offer is to get there early as you reasonably can. So how early you have to get there depends largely on the town, the city, and the busking culture. So here in Newcastle, it's not unheard of for people to get to the main pitch at fairly ridiculous times. So we're talking like 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. It can get a little bit silly sometimes, but the reason why you do that is so that you can secure the pitch. You secure the best pitch, so you don't have to worry about getting one later on. Let's say if you rock up at say 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and you want to secure the pitch with the best footfall and kind of the best like sort of area in terms of playing. So those are really the main reasons for securing it that way. Say if you turn up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, for example, you might get a pitch. You might be lucky. You might get the main one, and it'll be everything will be fine. But more often than not, there is a fair bit of competition. So getting there early is the best way, I think, to kind of get in front of the competition, shall we say. So you put yourself at a major advantage by doing so. However, this comes with a word of warning. Not everyone is going to like this. Not everyone is going to be happy that you're there. You, depending on kind of the town or the city, there's a lot of this busking etiquette, shall we say, about whether you only be on the pitch for half an hour and then move to another one, or be on there for an hour or two or whatever. The standard sometimes is like an hour or 2 hours, but sometimes it's not feasible to move around all the time. It's just either because there's too many of us in one town, or either it's just not practical to move your gear every half an hour all the time. You know what I mean? So it makes sense from that point of view. But yeah, there'll be a few aggrieved individuals, shall we say, who won't be happy the fact that you got out of bed before them. But as far as how I see it is, if busking is your living and it's a financial imperative, then getting there early is kind of really in your best interests. But for people who kind of where it's not their financial imperative and stuff, or they kind of don't, or they're quite new to it, they might deem it as unfair, or they might kind of they'll just kind of give you that look as in like, oh well, that's not really, that's not really fair, or you're staying here all day, that kind of thing. Some people are just not going to be happy about that. But again, if it's your living and it's a financial imperative, then yeah, it's in your best interest to get there as early as you reasonably can, and just put yourself at an advantage. So yeah, that's the first bit. The second thing I think is worth talking about is your choice of pitch. So this is going to be determined by a few things. So one, it's going to be determined how central it is to the town or city, so the location. Second, how many people are going to be there, i.e. the footfall, so how many people are going to be walking past you. The acoustics, so how your instrument naturally sounds in that environment. And another one I think is worth talking about is the weather as well. So the first bit to address is obviously the central pitches tend to be the most vied for. They tend to be the most popular because they tend to have all the above components. So if it's usually central to the town, there's going to be a lot more people, and it's because a lot more people equals more money basically. So that's kind of that's another thing as well. If it's in kind of sort of a wide square, for example, people can sit and listen to you as well. So you can sometimes you can get a captive audience rather than just being a passing act all the time. So that's a thing to consider as well. It's this. And in terms of the footfall as well, there's a few things there as well. It's like you either can have a footfall where it's kind of in front of you but going opposite directions like that, or it's coming from behind you or coming towards you. So those tend to be the best pitches because you're being seen from all directions and being heard as well. You're being heard from all directions as well. Another thing to think about is how your instrument sounds on that pitch and in that particular environment as well. If it's in kind of a wide open space, which is kind of a lot of time at my preferred places, the sound carries really nicely. So you don't always have to crank it to 11, even though I'm pretty guilty of doing that. Um, so you don't always have to crank it to 11 in order for people to be able to hear you from afar. So that's another thing to consider as well. So, or if you're in a pitch where it's kind of a bit narrower in a town centre, for example, you might be in front of a shop doorway or a shop window, and then there's another block of shops in front of you. Again, sometimes your sound quality can be really good there as well because you're not cranking it so high and it's not affecting your sound too much, and it's just kind of just bouncing straight back at you. So there's a few other things there's things to consider there as well, how your instrument sounds, and there's quite a lot that goes into it. Another thing I think is worth talking about as well is obviously how the pitch functions in terms of like the weather. So for example, if you've got a wide, a square, for example, and it's a sunny day, that's going to be an ideal one as well. But that pitch is not going to be ideal, for example, if it starts raining. So sometimes you gotta look at it that way as well. So if you know the day is, if you know it's going to be raining at some point during the day, it's best to know which pitches are sheltered and which are not. So if you can get a pitch that has some decent shelter, that's another thing that makes a good pitch as well. So, and this differs from town to city. There are some towns that have a good amount of shelter pitches, where they're essentially in abundance. Others have virtually none. So it's best to kind of just, you kind of learn from experience and from just playing in these places, and you just learn that way. And I guess another thing for some buskers, it's just personal comfort, personal preference. Some buskers like other pitches more than others. I know some buskers who are not that fussed on playing like the sort of the more central pitches with the thickest footfall. Some feel they don't do as well there. So yeah, it's sometimes it can be a fickle thing. Sometimes it's just, again, simply personal comfort, personal preference, and that's kind of it. It's not always an exact science. The next thing that I think is worth talking about is how to deal with the public. Busking, as you know, is a very public profession, so you are going to be dealing with the public on a daily basis. So you are going to deal with all types of people. You are going to come across various types of punters, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You are going to come across probably characters and people that you would not come across in everyday life. You got to remember about this. This is not like doing a gig, a normal gig where there's a certain type of punter there, and people generally behave themselves, and everyone is more or less the same mentality. In public, it's not like that. You're on display to the whole world, and if you're kind of going to be a bit of a public spectacle, really, and that is going to attract anyone and everyone to you. And how you deal with these people is a huge part of the game, really. So you are going to get people like on the extreme end, for example, you are going to get people approaching you and interacting with you that, let's be honest, you'd rather not be around. Let's just say it how it is. You are just gonna, in some cases, you are going to get some abject weirdos, and it's really is it's people they're not always malicious or harmful, but they're going to make you quite uncomfortable, and you got to deal with people like that in a certain way. So you can't how uncomfortable they make you. For example, if they're making you mega uncomfortable and they just won't get out your space, for example, sometimes the direct approach is the only way, as in get out my space, that kind of thing. Sometimes, if someone, for example, is making a cheap remark about you playing, is saying you're crap or whatever, a lot of the time rising to it is not the best thing, because really you've got better things to be doing. You've got money to make, and it's better not to waste your time on people like that. So yeah, how you deal with belligerent members of the public is a huge part of it, and that's some of the best advice I think I can give on that. You don't always try and like rise to people saying stuff about you, because it's just really it's usually not worth it. Um, but people who kind of like make you uncomfortable, don't be afraid to tell them to, to state your case and say, go away, get out my space, make me uncomfortable, that kind of thing. Don't be afraid to do that, because sometimes that's the only way. On the other hand, you'll come across some really good people who are really interested in your playing, people who are just, sometimes really moved by it, and that always brightens it up, because busking, it's a very social thing, really. It's a very social profession. It's and sometimes interacting with people and seeing people and stuff like that is kind of, it's just a huge part of it. It's a social thing. So it's always nice to come. So it's always nice to interact with people. Very positive members of the public. And generous punters. And it's always nice to have that effect on people. So yeah, that's some advice I can offer on sort of dealing with the public. Try not to rise to egregious punters and belligerent individuals, because really they're just not worth it. Another thing to talk about is repertoire. What kind of repertoire do you do, and how long does it have to be? How many songs you have to get. I get that question quite a lot. Um, in the beginning, so when you're trying to get your set together, I would recommend an hour. So an hour would be good, because let's say if you're only accustomed to doing a couple of hours, and for example, that's something that you can repeat quite easily, and it won't get too tiring for other people, and it won't be boring for yourself either. So, but as I feel half an hour would be a bit, it would be like too little in a sense, and it would sound like you're playing sort of the same songs over and over again, especially if you're doing it over a long period. So an hour would be pretty sufficient in the beginning. That would be fine. There would be no problems with that. And eventually, over time, you just build it up. You know what I mean? So eventually, you can get to the point where you have like 2, 3, 4 hours worth of stuff, and you can kind of just repeat it, and you can chop and change between which songs you feel like playing and stuff like that. So it's a nice place to be in, where you're not constrained by having literally the same set list all the time. So you can play different. You obviously, you have your staples, and you have your songs that are kind of your biggest hits and make you the most money. But you can chop and change between them if you have a lot more songs, and you can kind of keep it. You can keep it fresh for other people, and keep it fresh for yourself as well. So that's a few notes on that. The type of repertoire you do, like the music you're going to play, that's entirely up to you. Whatever you're into. For me, I do a lot of the electric guitar stuff. So I do like everything from like Guns N' Roses, Van Halen, Joe Satriani, that kind of thing. So that's going to be all that's electric guitar music, and it's all really really guitar oriented. So that's going to be the perfect type of stuff for me to play. Um, so you kind of got to find out what kind of songs you like, and just and sort of what you kind of got to balance it between what you like and what you think other people are going to like. And that, again, that takes a bit of that takes a bit of experimenting, and just getting out there and doing it, and see how people react to your playing and react to your songs. So yeah, there's a few tips on repertoire. The last thing to address is the issue of confidence. How do you get more confidence with busking? How do you attain it? And the answer to this is not really the answer that necessarily everyone would want to hear, because there's no real quick fixes or anything, but you just have to get out there and do it. It's simple as that. You just have to get out there and do it, and just experience it for yourself. So, I know my first few times doing it, it was awkward. It was strange. It was just kind of, I almost didn't know where to like place myself. I'm stood there with my guitar, and it's just like you kind of feel like everyone's just staring at you, and just you're like you've come from another planet. It's a very foreign environment at first, but the first afterwards I got used to it. I got used to being out in an open public area. My playing improved as well, so there's you get that kind of positive. You get into that positive cycle. It's like the more you do it, the more you'll get better at it, and the better you get, the more donations you get from people. So, really that's the only way you can sort of attain confidence that way, is just to get out there and just do it. Simple as that. But in the meantime, there are a few different ways you can kind of you can present yourself better. So for example, if you, whether you're sitting down or standing up, I do a combination of both. Um, it helps to kind of like sit up straight or stand up straight, and just to kind of posture yourself in a way that's just generally is more conducive to like a confident pose. So it's kind of try not to like look at the ground or anything like that, or kind of like look too timid or feeble, because that will translate to people in terms of how your playing comes across as well. Um, so there's that as well. And another thing as well, try to, even if you don't necessarily feel like being there, try to put across that you want to be there. You know what I mean? Try, make it look like to people that you're glad to be there and that you're glad to be playing to them. Because that will come across really positively to them as well, even if they don't necessarily like your music. I've had people come up to me and then say, "Oh, you look like you're really enjoying what you're playing," and that's a really lovely thing to hear. So, and that's another thing as well, because if you sit there and you kind of like you just sort of just slouch there and you just can't be asked, that will communicate to people as a sort of like, well, why should I give him my quid if he can't be bothered? So that's a very important factor as well. Just try to make it look like you're enjoying playing music in public. You don't have to have like this big grin on your face all the time or anything, but it helps to kind of just present yourself in that way. So it's and your playing will come across differently as well. It will sound more energetic. It will sound more kind of sound more alive and everything. And hopefully that will lift people in the way that you want them to be. So yeah, I guess that's one way you can kind of present yourself better in the meantime. While you're trying to kind of attain the confidence for yourself. So yeah. That's but ultimately, just get out there and do it and experience it for yourself. I do hope you found that video informative, insightful and helpful. If you did, give it a thumbs up and of course, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.